They laughed before they even finished snapping the cuffs. One of the cops smirked, another shook his head like it was just another pathetic night shift story, and someone in the back whispered, another deadbeat dad pretending to be a hero. The single father didn't resist. He didn't argue. He just looked down at his trembling hands and then toward the hallway where his little girl had been crying minutes earlier. If you've ever been judged in a moment when your whole life was collapsing, stay with this story until the very end. And if stories like this move you, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel, because what happens next is something no one in that courtroom ever forgot. His name was Daniel Carter. To most people in that small courthouse town, he was just a quiet man with worn-out boots, a tired jacket, and a daughter who clung to his leg whenever strangers raised their voices. They didn't know about the years he'd spent overseas, the medals locked away in a shoebox, or the promises he made to his late wife at a military hospital before she took her last breath. All they saw was a single dad who worked nights, showed up late sometimes, and now stood accused of assaulting a city official during a heated eviction dispute. Earlier that morning, Daniel had woken up before dawn to pack his daughter Lily's lunch. He cut the sandwiches into little triangles the way her mother used to, even though it made him feel like his chest was caving in. Lily was 8, small for her age, with eyes too serious for a child. She watched him carefully, as if she was afraid he might disappear the way her mom had. When the eviction notice had been taped to the door the night before, Daniel didn't tell her. He smiled, tied her shoes, and promised everything would be okay. Veterans learn early how to carry fear without letting it show. The argument started when a city housing officer arrived with police support. Daniel tried to explain that there had been a mistake, that he had already submitted the payment extension paperwork. Voices rose. Lily started crying. A neighbor shouted something cruel. In the chaos, Daniel stepped forward too fast, his hand brushing the officer's arm. That was all it took. Suddenly, he was on the ground, knees pressed into his back, cuffs biting into his wrists while Lily screamed his name. By the time they reached the station, the laughter started. "You don't look like much of a soldier," one officer said when Daniel quietly mentioned his service. "Sure, buddy. And I'm a Navy SEAL." Daniel said nothing. He had learned long ago that real strength doesn't need to announce itself. The trial was scheduled quickly. Public defender, minor courtroom, barely anyone in the gallery. Daniel sat alone at the defense table, hands folded, head bowed. Lily was with a neighbor because Daniel didn't want her to see him like this. He replayed the moment again and again in his mind, wondering how a single touch had turned into this. He didn't fear jail for himself. He feared what would happen to his daughter if he didn't come home. The prosecutor painted him as unstable, aggressive, a man with possible trauma-related anger issues. The words stung more than the cuffs had. Yes, he had trauma. He had buried friends. He had watched children suffer in places most people couldn't pronounce. But anger? No. Everything he did was to protect, not to harm. When it was Daniel's turn to speak, he stood slowly. The room barely paid attention. He explained calmly, apologizing for the misunderstanding, for the fear caused, for everything. He mentioned his service once, not to impress, but to explain why he reacted when his child was scared. The judge nodded politely, already looking tired. That was when the door at the back of the courtroom opened. At first, no one noticed. Then the bailiff straightened. The prosecutor stopped mid-sentence. The judge looked up, eyes widening. A tall man in a crisp uniform stepped inside, silver stars gleaming on his shoulders, 4 of them. A 4-star general. Conversations died instantly. You could hear the air conditioning hum. The general didn't speak right away. He scanned the room, his gaze calm but piercing, until it landed on Daniel. And in that moment, something changed. His posture stiffened. His jaw tightened. Slowly, deliberately, he walked forward. "Permission to address the court," the general said. The judge nearly stumbled over his words granting it. The general turned, his voice steady but heavy with emotion. He spoke of a soldier he had commanded years ago. A man who volunteered for the most dangerous assignments. A man who once carried a wounded civilian child for miles under fire. A man who turned down promotions because he wanted to stay with his unit. As he spoke, Daniel's eyes filled with tears. He recognized the missions, the nights, the losses. That man, the general said, his voice breaking just slightly, is standing right there. The courtroom froze. The general described how Daniel had saved lives, how he had shielded others with his own body, how he had never once asked for recognition. He spoke about Daniel's wife, a military nurse, and the promise Daniel made to raise their daughter with kindness despite everything they'd endured. He looked directly at the officers who had laughed. This is not a dangerous man. This is a protector. No one moved. No one breathed. The judge cleared his throat, visibly shaken. The prosecutor's confident posture collapsed. Within minutes, the charges were dismissed. Not because of rank, the judge said, but because justice demanded truth. Daniel was free to go. As the cuffs were removed, Daniel didn't celebrate. He didn't glare. He simply exhaled, like someone who had been holding his breath for years. Outside the courtroom, Lily ran into his arms. The general knelt beside them, saluted Daniel, and whispered, "You did your duty. Now keep doing it." The story didn't end there. The city apologized. The eviction was overturned. A community that once whispered began to listen. But the real victory wasn't public. It was in the quiet nights when Daniel tucked Lily into bed, knowing he was still where he belonged. So if you ever feel judged, underestimated, or broken by a system that doesn't see your heart, remember this: your story isn't over. Sometimes, truth walks in when you least expect it, and when it does, even a courtroom full of laughter can fall silent. If this story moved you, hit like, subscribe, and stay with us, because stories of courage, faith, and quiet heroes deserve to be heard.